What's up, everyone? Welcome to Banter from the Bench podcast, episode 1.
Soundstripe.
Hey, guys. Thanks for joining. I am Kevin. I'm here with
Sean, and we are starting something new here, a little exciting. We both love sports, and Kevin, one day hit me up and said, "Why do I want to start a sports podcast?" And I basically said, "Why do I want to do one with you?" So we're starting a sports podcast here. For those of you who know us or don't know us, we come from Illinois, Chicagoland area, so we're Chicago sports fans. So we'll definitely be getting into a lot of Chicago sports talk, but we're also going to do more than that. We're planning on talking some national sports, just kind of different things going on throughout the week. Right now, I think our plan is to get one episode out a week. Could be more, could be less. Just kind of depends on what's going on. But anytime there's something new and exciting in the sports world going on, we're going to be here to talk about it, and hope a lot of you will join us. I know we're excited about it, and it's been a process to get here for episode 1. I know I personally have been battling a little bit of a sickness, and we had to delay it a little bit. We were both out of town for our other brother's wedding, so things have been kind of just getting delayed, but finally feels good to sit down here with you and get this ball rolling.
Yeah, I mean, we even had some technical difficulties along the way. I think we did about 12 test episodes just to get here, but we made it. And I think you brought up a good point too, right? Like the idea is to do a podcast a week and talk about national news, and then the back end will be Chicago related sports stuff. So if you're Chicago folks, stay along. If you just want to hear about how bad the White Sox are, you can hang out for the rest of the episode too. It's really up to you. But I think the cool thing is if there are large stories that are breaking, then, we're open to record and talk about that too. Like the Shohei Ohtani news that just dropped not too long ago. And he is now Sean's favorite baseball player of all time. But I think a fun place to start would be to talk about what got you into sports in the first place. What's the earliest sports memory that you have? Maybe it's a game that you were at. Maybe it's a game you were watching on TV, or it was a sports story. So, Sean, if you want to start, talk to us about how you got into sports and the earliest memory you can remember.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny. So obviously we both really like sports. If we're sitting down here doing this, but our parents aren't big sports fans, so it's not like that was passed down to us at all. It's just something. I'll speak for both of us real quick, but something we just developed kind of on our own.
Definitely.
For me personally, like some of my first sports memories just kind of involve like playing games around the neighborhood with kids, or playing games in our backyard and stuff. Just kind of messing around. I know we played a lot of wiffle ball, or for those who were lucky enough to partake in the all famous pool basketball league that we used to do. So stuff like that.
Still undefeated.
Yeah. For me personally, it just always the first joy I had was actually playing them, and then I realized, sports are pretty cool. I want to learn more about them. So then I kind of as I got older became fans of Chicago teams. It's White Sox, Bulls, Blackhawks, Bears, and we'll get into college fandom in a little bit, I'm sure. Not to spoil anything, but that's where Kevin and I differ a little bit.
Big time.
But yeah, so just wasn't the best teams growing up for the most part, especially being a White Sox fan. I know we had 2005, but besides that, wasn't anything ever exciting. I was a little bit too young to remember a lot of the Jordan stuff, so unfortunately I can't really count that. Bears early 2000s had some good years. Other than that, it's been a lot of poop. Blackhawks, they've probably been the staple. That's been like the most exciting team for most of my life. But yeah, so just kind of really enjoyed playing sports at first, and then just ended up liking it more and more as a fan, and even got to the point where I a handful of years ago started writing about sports just as something to occupy my time, and that was something that I enjoyed a lot, something I was able to do full time for a little bit, and even though I don't do it full time now, it's something I still do. I started out writing about the White Sox, and that kind of took off, and then had a little opportunity to do it full time, and now I write about the Blackhawks. So still try to stay active in that department, and now I can say I'm also a podcast host. So just another thing to add to the resume. But yeah, that's kind of my story, my background. And I guess the one memory that comes to mind when I think of actually going to a game involves going to Wrigley, actually, for a crosstown game when we were kids, and we used to always get there early and watch them, take batting practice or whatever. And I was a little kid, and I remember watching Frank Thomas warm up at first base, and he threw me a ball. And Frank Thomas is not just a great Chicago athlete, but great athlete of all time. So if Frank Thomas does something for you like that, and you weren't a White Sox fan at the time, the little kid in you is going to be a White Sox fan from that day forward. But luckily I already was one at the time, so that's kind of my first memory, getting a ball from him, and the rest was history. But enough about me. Let's hear some about you, Kev.
That's funny. I didn't expect that because we didn't rehearse this at all. We didn't talk about what you were going to say or what I was going to say. So that's funny. I didn't expect that at all. And I think I was born 3 years earlier, but I had a very similar growing up with sports because we like all the same teams except college sports. So, just to give a little bit more insight there, Sean's a Florida Gators fan. I'm a Miami Hurricanes fan. Very random, I know. We can talk about that in another episode about how that all came to be. But, I never really remember any of the Bulls runs. Their latest championship was 1996. I was only 6 years old. I wasn't into sports at that point because my parents didn't really watch too many sports. So I think a large portion of it was, the Jose Valentin White Sox, and just that team was fun to watch. And then you grow into like the Maglio Ordonez White Sox and, the Ben Gordon Bulls and Chris Duhon and Kirk Heinrich, and then you get Derrick Rose. And for the Bears, that's just a shit show in itself. We had some early success in the early 2000s, but that didn't seem to last very long. So ironically for me, my first memory of sports in general, aside from, playing in the neighborhood, because we were constantly outside as kids. Mom had to yell at us to come inside to come eat dinner, and we still wouldn't. But for me, it's actually watching Drew Brees at Purdue. I had a really good friend down the street who was a big Purdue fan, so naturally I became a Purdue fan as well and liked them for a good portion of my younger childhood. But I just remember watching Drew Brees at Purdue and just watching him carve up the different Big Ten defenses. And unfortunately, my friend was also a Packers fan, so I liked the Packers for a small portion of my life until I grew up and realized, what the hell am I doing? And honestly, it probably would have worked out better for me, but I can't do that living in Chicago. So, yeah, for me, it was watching Drew Brees at Purdue, and that's kind of what got me into sports in general. And then, I just started watching Chicago sports. Growing up, my favorite basketball player was Tracy McGrady. Shameless plug there. One of the most electric players in NBA history, in my opinion. And Sean ironically liked his cousin a lot. He liked Vince Carter a lot. So, that's one thing that we had in common. But, over the years, we haven't really had too much luck, but I think it creates good stories. And, that's why we're here, is so that we can talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've got a lot of content to talk about with the NFL draft just wrapping up, the White Sox with the worst record in baseball or close to it. And then Sean's going to go more heavy on the Blackhawks. He's got a lot of experience. He does a lot of research. He watches a lot of film, so he's going to talk a lot about the Blackhawks. But yeah, as far as my childhood goes, that's about as early as I can remember is watching the Drew Brees days and just watching him carve up defenses at Purdue.
Yeah, that's funny. I think you know, I was living in Arizona. Right now I live in North Dakota, and when I was packing up some stuff to move, you know, our mom, and like most moms, saves thousands of pictures from over the years, and then when it's time for you to take them, you don't really want them, but she makes you.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing she found a picture of I think it was you and Ryan in Packers gear when you guys were kids, and she was like, "Oh, you want this for like blackmail or something?" I was like, "No, I'm not gonna do that to him. I'll let that memory die. It doesn't need to be around anymore." But at least you turned around and you realized what you were doing there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say I was a Packers fan for probably a third of Brett Favre's career. I would say that's about as much as I can remember before I made the jump to being a Bears fan. But yeah, I mean, I think to not get too heavy into Bears topics right now. I think they're in an interesting position. I think that they've got a huge opportunity to turn the corner and make a name for themselves finally, because for whatever reason they can't get the damn quarterback position right. And I know I feel hopeful about Caleb Williams. Doesn't hurt that he has the same last name as us, so the whole city's going to be representing the Williams family.
That's why we started the podcast.
That's exactly it. We just needed Caleb Williams. We just needed Caleb Williams to be a Bear. But yeah, I think they're in an interesting position right now, along with the Blackhawks. They've got number 2 pick coming up, so I think they're in an interesting position. And the Bulls are just kind of stuck in just being mid, and the White Sox are just going to suck for forever, apparently.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting point you bring up, kind of looking at the outlook of Chicago sports teams here. I think you could probably argue that the Bears, they're probably the most optimistic out of any Chicago team right now, and the only reason I say that is because I think like quarterback is probably the most important position in all of professional sports, and if you get that right, like your team's probably going to be really good for a long time. So having someone like Caleb Williams, even though he hasn't earned anything or played a snap in the NFL, just has loads of excitement for myself. Like, I'm super excited. I know you are too, and just seems like most Bears fans have finally come around to him if they didn't already after all the field stuff settled and stuff like that. But yeah, I would probably rank them as maybe right now the most like exciting or optimistic team. And obviously the Blackhawks, with having Connor Bedard, they're not far behind, probably a 1A, 1B situation. They kind of already have their superstar. And they got the number 2 pick in the NHL draft lottery that just happened this past week. The league didn't want to let us win it again, but we'll take 2. Not going to complain about that. And they have just an absolute plethora of draft picks coming up this year and in the future years. So they're going to be right there too, kind of competing for the 2 most exciting teams. And now we'll stick to teams that we're fans of for this exercise, but maybe a little bit of a hot take, maybe not. I actually think the White Sox are a little bit more hopeful and have a little bit more of an optimistic future than the Bulls do right now. And I say that because the White Sox, they're terrible. Don't get me wrong. Like, I still watch them, and I don't enjoy it, but I just do it because I'm a fan. It's hard for me to just completely go without watching them, even if they go 0-162. But they at least have a plan in place. They're sticking to the rebuild.
They have direction.
Yep. They've already traded some key pieces like Dylan Cease most recently, and there was a story that came out this week that says like they're going to listen on guys like Eloy Jimenez, Eric Fetty, Michael Kopech. So like they're clearly committed to this. Like, hey, we're not going to be good, but we're going to work towards trying to get this right again. Now, also playing devil's advocate there, we just went through this where we tore everything down to shreds. Everything looked great. We collected prospects. Only downside is pretty much all of them didn't develop at the major league level. They were premier prospects, but once they hit the MLB, they just couldn't really take that next step. But the Bulls, they're kind of in hell. It sounds like
there's no direction with them whatsoever. They like being mid. They like to be on the cusp of making the playoffs. Maybe they'll make the play-in, but that's about it. And they refuse to give the fans any sense of direction either, which is so frustrating because you could trade a guy like DeMar and he would be very valuable to an NBA team in the playoffs because, to be honest, at his age, he's still playing really damn well. And Zach LaVine, he's kind of a question mark because he shows flashes, but part of me wonders if he's a clubhouse cancer there. And then you've got pieces like Alex Caruso. I think you could get some nice return for Alex Caruso, but I don't know why they just refuse to just tear it all down. It doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe it's just because this year's NBA draft is not all that talented, but even just to give the fans a sense of like, hey, we're going to restart, we're going to wash our hands, and we're going to just build from the ground up. I think the fans would appreciate that more than going into next season with the same exact roster as we did this year and expecting different results.
Yeah, you kind of nailed it there. It's a good season for the Bulls is leading the league in attendance and keeping fans showing up to games. It seems like for years they haven't really cared about the product they put out on the court. All they really care about is attendance numbers and profit margins, which is a Jerry Reinsdorf special. But yeah, it's just they're in a really tough spot. Obviously, the Vooch trade didn't work out the way they hoped. That hurt losing a couple first round. Yeah, I know. That hurt losing a couple first rounders for that. And then obviously they were stuck where, I would have never in a million years re-signed him, but they really didn't have a choice because they had DeMar under contract. Plus, LaVine wasn't hurt at that time. He was playing. He was pushed. I think he hadn't signed his max deal yet, but he was pushing towards that. And so it kind of made sense in that regard that like, hey, well, we should probably just re-sign this guy for like 20 mil per and maybe we can build around him. They didn't build around him, but yeah, like you're saying, like there's no direction. The fact that Caruso's still on this team is insane. Like he should have been traded immediately. Any team in the NBA, for the most part, minus like the bottom dwellers, would take that dude on in a heartbeat. He's
to be clear, we love you, Caruso. If you ever listen to this episode in your life, which is less than a 0% chance, we love you, Caruso. But yeah, you need to be on a playoff contender because you deserve it.
Yeah, and now like obviously DeRozan's contract's up, but there's been nothing but talks about him wanting to stay in Chicago and. Makes me feel like they really might actually do it again, and it's just it's hard to get behind a team and get excited about a team that is just constantly mediocre and it's just rinse, wash, repeat. There's nothing. The most exciting thing that's happened with the Bulls over the last few years is Kobe White was a surprise this year. He took his game to another level. He actually looks like he could be a valuable player, and the contract they got him on right now is a bargain, assuming he plays like this again. Other than that, it's like, there hasn't been a whole lot exciting. We beat the Bucks in the playoffs, one game. Like, that was cool. I think DeMar had like 30 or 40 or something last season when they won one game. But really, that's kind of been it. They've been meddling around the play-in, and like you're kind of saying, they'd be best served to just rip that organization to shreds. Obviously, I think the president they brought in. And the GM maybe aren't looking like the two promising candidates that they seem like they were going to be. So doing, when I say rip that thing to shreds, I mean front office too. Probably try to give it a run and look for something new. Maybe someone who's got a better vision or someone who can figure out how to right this ship because it's been a long time coming. And it's sad that, one of the most historic and valuable franchises in the NBA is just totally content with, not being like not having pride. It's just, hey,
Yeah,
we
it
sold
would be like the
tickets.
Lakers being dog shit consistently, if we're being honest. Like that's the type of branding that the Bulls offer the NBA. And I think you bring up a good point. When we brought in Arturis, he had that Denver DNA, and we kind of saw him as like our messiah. We're like, okay, you're gonna turn the ship around. We're finally gonna be good, and it's just been mediocre this whole time through. And I think you bring up another good point too with Kobe. He's been kind of our silver lining all season, because this season, I don't know how many games you watched personally. Like I would more so be a box score watcher, where I would let the game happen. I would check the box score, see how Kobe did. And that's about it. Cause it was painful to watch the Bulls. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. I think this season, this off season, will be very telling on what the future of the Bulls is. Because if they don't do anything, I think it's going to be another 3 years of just the same old stuff. Because then they're going to re-sign DeRozan, and it's just going to be the same story all over again. So this off season will be huge. And guys, this is just a teaser of everything that we're going to cover. We wanted this episode to be short and sweet, so that way we could more so introduce ourselves, talk about our backgrounds. Again, what we're going to cover is national news coverage as well as Chicago sports, because it's in our blood and we can't help ourselves. So the front end of every episode will be all of our national news. Back end will be Chicago sports. If anybody has any questions or they want us to talk about something in particular, send us an email. It's banterfromthebenchpod@gmail.com. So if there's any topics or any questions you guys have, throw those in an email, send it to us. We're happy to address different things that people want to hear more about. So thank you for taking the time with us today. The next episode should be about an hour in length. That's what we want each episode to be. But yeah, it was nice to introduce ourselves to kind of kick off this whole podcast. And Sean, I'll leave you with the parting thoughts.
yeah, it's a good first episode. We talked about a lot more sports than I kind of anticipated, but I guess that's a good thing if we're gonna be having a sports podcast here. So it's easy to get lost in that talk, and looking forward to having more structure and more national and local Chicago news and stuff to talk about moving forward. But yeah, I had a good time getting on here, and excited to keep this thing going, and hopefully a lot of people follow and listen, and we'll have a good time. So we hope you do too.
If you want sponsorship opportunities, send us an email. All right, everybody, take care. Have yourselves a good weekend, and hopefully Chicago sports is onward and upward.